In the year 201 of the Fourth Era, the land of Tamriel finds itself once again plagued with conflict. With an ineffective emperor on the throne, the return of dragons, and tensions between the Empire and Aldmeri Dominion winding tighter with each passing day, it's only a matter of time before something snaps. To top this hostile political situation, Ulfric Stormcloak, the Jarl of Windhelm, has murdered the High King of Skyrim and declared war against the Empire. Desperate to maintain their grasp over one of their largest and most important territories, the Empire dispatches General Tulus to put down this insurrection, once and for all. The clashing of these two ideologies launching Skyrim into a full-blown civil war, where there can only be one victor. In a stroke of luck, the long-awaited conflict had nearly ended before it truly began, as shortly after Ulfric murdered Torrig, the High King of Skyrim, the Empire managed to capture the Jarl and a handful of his Stormcloak rebels in a surprise ambush as they attempted to cross over into the Imperial capital of Cyrodiil. Bound and gagged to prevent his use of the Thu'um, an ancient and powerful language of dragons, Jarl Ulfric was transported to the nearby town of Helgen, where he, his Stormcloaks, and a mysterious stranger all face execution. In an act of divine intervention, the execution was interrupted when a massive dragon known as Alduin the World Eater attacked the town, burning the Imperial garrison to a crisp and allowing the Jarl to escape unharmed. With both Ulfric Stormcloak and General Tullius having survived the slaughter at Helgen and returning to the respective headquarters, solitude for Tullius and Windhelm for Ulfric, the true fight for Skyrim would soon commence. The arms and armor of each faction reflect not only the specialties of the soldiers, but also their preferred method of combat. Due to engine limitations, the wildly amateur and impractical flailing of swords combined with the 5v5 NPC battles meant to represent entire cohorts present a terrible impression of how these armies fight from a lore perspective, and how successful their in-lore tactics truly are. In a direct comparison, the Imperial Legion is akin to the Roman legions of our time in arms, armor, and tactics. The same can be said for Stormcloaks and the barbarian hordes, or more historically accurate, the various diverse armies of Northern Europe. While in-game we get fights like this, where there is no formation, no cavalry, no stabbing movements, no unit cohesion, and most egregiously, not even enough combatants to form even a basic battle line. The lore is far more akin to the faction's real-life counterparts, meaning battles would actually look more like this. With the precedent established, let us continue on to the analyses of these two fighting forces to show you definitively why the Imperial Legion will always win this war. To begin, let's establish how large the conflict truly is in the grand scheme of things, and of course, the perspective is fluid in this matter. For the Stormcloaks and people of Skyrim, this is total war, a literal fight for the survival of their homeland and way of life. To these people, the Empire is a juggernaut to be brought down if any sense of peace is to be had. This is sharply contrasted by the perspective of the Empire, who view this as a small insurrection, largely insignificant in comparison to the looming threat of war with the Aldmeri Dominion. The Empire maintains whole confidence that the conflict will be stopped by a single general with a single legion of mostly undertrained and under-equipped conscripts. This confidence goes a long way to showcase not only the effectiveness of the Imperial Legions, but also of the commander leading them. Let's not forget, however, that hubris was a fatal flaw in our historical Imperial Rome, and it's likely that Tamriel's empire is equally as hubristic. When we analyze the armies, however, it becomes clear that their confidence is not entirely unfounded. The weapons carried by the armies are reflective of not only wealth and availability, but also battle style and tactics. The Stormcloaks carry a wide assortment of weapons made of both iron and steel, and covering a large amount of utility. Iron swords and steel daggers are equally as common amongst their ranks as iron battle axes and steel maces, In addition to this, the Stormcloaks will also carry shields made of wood and iron, as well as those that are entirely steel. In large battles, the Stormcloaks often link together in a shield wall, forming fish-scale patterns to protect their comrades next to them, and overall improving their defensive capabilities at the cost of their offense and mobility. With more money going through the Imperial Legions, the weapon quality and type becomes more standardized to better fit their style of warfare. The standard issue Imperial weapon is a short steel sword designed for thrusting, as well as slicing when necessary, and a small steel dagger. Paired with their large wood and steel tower shields, these weapons allow for the legions to get up close and personal with their enemies, removing the advantage of reach and power that most two-handed weapons provide. A useful stratagem against armies that prioritize these longer weapons like the Stormcloaks. Of course, this approach would still be incredibly dangerous without the advent of armor to protect the soldier when they're in these up-close and personal encounters. The Legion utilizes 3 grades of armor for protection, including light-grade leather and chainmail armor, medium-grade studded leather and chainmail armor, and heavy-grade steel armor. In contrast, the Stormcloaks exclusively use light-grade cloth and chainmail armor, with commanders seen using a variant of light-grade leather and chainmail armor. Both sides boast superior resistance to slashing attacks due to their use of chainmail armor, which deflect blows of that variety with relative ease. While chainmail is strong against slashing attacks, it does not protect well against stabbing attacks, to which the Legion uses primarily. Seeing as how the Stormcloak military is ill-equipped to utilize stabbing motions with their choice of weaponry, and Legion forces assault too close to the battle lines for their enemies to properly utilize reach, the Legion and their thrust-dominant tactics receive a massive advantage, essentially forcing Stormcloak lines into shield walls to prevent taking massive casualties. That said, even with superior arms, armor, and tactics, it is not an easy fight for the Legion. Many of the Legion forces under General Tulus are conscripts from the surrounding province, most of which are young men, new to the Legion and inexperienced in combat. While it is true that Tulus does have a decent force of veteran legionaries from Cyrodiil, it's unclear just how many are under his command and where they are stationed. For Ulfric, the majority of his Stormcloaks are volunteers from across Skyrim, and quite a few of them are veterans of the Imperial Legion itself, having fought countless battles all across Tamriel. These veterans not only bring with them skill and expertise, but also intimate knowledge of the Empire's art of war, leading the Stormcloaks to adjust their tactics whenever possible to attack the Legion where they are weakest. This typically results in raids and ambushes on camps and along the roadside. The Stormcloaks will typically avoid large-scale conflict whenever possible, preferring to leverage their dominating infantry force to separate and encapsulate the legionaries. While this method of warfare is preferable for the Nords in the thick frozen forests of Skyrim, no military can hope to win with these tactics alone. To mitigate this, both sides employ specialty units amidst their infantry to better meet the logistical needs of the battlefield. Archers are a common sight on both sides, with Stormcloak archers utilizing wooden longbows and hunting bows with iron and steel arrows to even the odds from a distance. While these weapons are highly effective against their enemies, the Imperial Legion has them, once again, outclassed. The legionaries use Imperial bows with steel arrows exclusively, with greater power coming from their choice of bow and consistently superior piercing ability from their choice of arrows. The Stormcloak's light and easily pierced armor doesn't stand a chance, leading to the Legion once again taking the edge in a 1-to-1 comparison. In the many camps for each army, spread across the whole of Skyrim, we can find reference to a unit that is most certainly used, but never seen in-game. Horses, specifically cavalry. The heavy weaponry of the classical era combat. The utility of cavalry is versatile enough that we can only really speculate how the Legion and Stormcloaks would have used it. A safe bet, however, would be to assume that their cavalry is used largely as a shock unit, hitting the infantry lines from the sides or rear in a typical hammer and anvil style. It is also possible that, depending on the needs of the battle, for archers to mount the horses, creating a ranged cavalry unit in addition to the standard. Now that we have established the main components of the armies, a question arises. How do these units fare against the many impressive fortifications of Skyrim's large cities? Well, the short answer would be siege weaponry. When besieging major cities or fortifications, each army makes use of artillery units, namely catapults, allowing them to press the defenders into a sally-out for battle, or risk complete destruction of their defensive position. If a defensive position is destroyed, it creates openings for the opposing army to invade the fortification. One way or the other, the armies will have to clash. While this is all we can ascertain for Stormcloak land units, we do know that the Legion deploys one additional unit that is noticeably absent from Ulfric's ranks: battle mages. While the use of magic is frowned upon and typically avoided in Nord society, it is openly accepted and actively encouraged in the other provinces, leading to many mages lining the ranks of the Imperial Legion. For the most part seen acting as interrogators, it is confirmed that they also see action on the front lines alongside the soldiers. Legion mages, for the most part, utilize the art of destruction magic, harnessing the elemental powers of fire, lightning, and ice to use against their foes, as well as the art of restoration magic at their respective forts to help heal the wounded. It's likely the Legion also deploys mages who utilize other forms of magic, like illusion or alteration, to assist on the battlefield. Relating to both magic and restoration, the Legion, as well as Stormcloaks, set up triage tents for the wounded in their respective field camps. It is here that those who have been wounded in battle can receive the treatment they need to get up and get back out on the front lines. This is accomplished through the leveraging of alchemy, a field of magic, to create and distribute potions of healing, as well as potions to increase one's vitality. In a world so full of magic and blessings as that of Nirn, the use of potions is all but commonplace. While potions provide a generous benefit to the user, there's even more that a soldier can do to stay in the Aedrus' good graces. Pendants dedicated to each party's respective god provide a small boost to those who have been blessed. These beautiful articles of neck jewelry grant their wearer a blessing related to the god that the pendant represents. On the Imperial side, amulets of Archay are common, which grant the wearer a slight boost to their overall health. And on the Stormcloak side, pendants to the god Tulus are frequent, granting a bonus to their use of the Thume, something that is probably only helpful for Ulfric, the only Stormcloak who can actually use that ability. However, it remains a staunch reminder as to why they're in this war to begin with. Amulets of Stendarr are found in frequent use on both sides, the blessings of which improve the blocking abilities of their wearer, a perfect addition to the uniform of a career soldier. In addition to this, should the soldier pray at the shrine of their god prior to a battle, they may receive an additional blessing, leading to even more vitality or strength on the battlefield. All the blessings on Nirn won't count for much if the soldier enters the fray ill-prepared. This is why each army employs the skills of a quartermaster. These loyal workers are found throughout the various camps and cities of Skyrim, and are primarily in charge of arming and supplying the troops. They can also be found improving weapons and even trade goods and supplies when given the opportunity, ensuring that the soldiers they support have all the equipment they need prior to a battle. This leads to another main point that is often overlooked: racial abilities and recruitment practices for each army. As you know by now, the Stormcloaks are almost entirely a pure Nordic force. Sure, by proxy of the Dragonborn joining, we know that they accept all races into their ranks. However, any race other than Nord are very few and far in between. Historically, the Nords are a relatively tall, tough, and hardy people, boasting a resistance to cold and its various effects. With vast swaths of Skyrim buried under thick snow with biting winds blasting the surface, this natural resistance allows the army of Nords to comfortably traverse the treacherous terrain, settling camps and rally points where the other races dare not venture. In addition to this, their use of a battle cry can often frighten their opponents, which, when combined with a heavy Nordic assault, can spell doom for any defending force. For the legions, their ranks are comprised of all races that inhabit Tamriel, leading to increased versatility in a multitude of scenarios. It is not uncommon to witness Wood Elf archers and Orc berserkers fighting alongside High Elf mages and Redguard swordmasters, each bringing with them a unique racial ability that assists in gaining the edge on their opponents. In Skyrim, the Legion under Tulus is mostly comprised of Imperials and Nords, as the Pale Pass connecting Skyrim and Cyrodiil is currently snowed in, preventing the Legion from reinforcing their positions with more veteran and specialty units. That said, this still has its advantages. With a large Nord population amidst their ranks, the previous advantage of landscape that the Stormcloaks boast becomes null and void against their fellow Nords. Their superior height and strength is negligible next to Imperials, which are close enough to nullify both those factors. Even the Nord's famous battle cry to frighten their enemies can be counteracted with the Imperial's racial ability, Voice of the Emperor, that calms those around them, including enemies. As the war begins to ramp up, clear territory lines are established as the various holds decide who they are going to back, with Hafengar, Hjalmarch, Falkreath, and the Reach backing the Empire, and Winterhold, Eastmarch, the Pale, and the Rift backing the Stormcloaks, dividing Skyrim down the middle and centered around Whiterun, which remains the sole undecided hold for quite some time. Among these holds in Skyrim are found a plethora of old and dilapidated forts, some long abandoned, others warmed by the fires of new inhabitants. Over the course of the Civil War, a handful of these fortresses are seized for use by the opposing armies, strategic positions that would become the focal point for sieges during the campaign. Throughout this entire war, both armies maintain consistent and steady supply lines within their respective holds, leveraging the various farms and armors that dot the landscape to keep the troops well fed and supplied. In order to maintain operations on such a massive scale, they also utilize the services of military couriers to transport orders from hold to hold. A single legion or Stormcloak courier on foot is able to traverse a great distance each day, remaining relatively inconspicuous, allowing for effective communication of orders from the army's headquarters to the various camps and forts across Skyrim. Whenever analyzing any large-scale strategic maneuvers, it's vital that one analyze the commander of the forces in turn, as well as to determine what their ultimate goal is. Their goal greatly impacts their approach and the overall campaign at large. For Ulfric, the goal is simple: unite Skyrim under his banner and against the Empire at any and all cost. His tactics are bold and aggressive, and his recruiting appeals to the old way of the Nords, leveraging their ages-old animosity with elves and the recent political events involving the Empire's ban of Talos worship to his advantage. For Tulus, he takes a more even-tempered and logistical approach, aiming to only commit his forces if it is strategically advantageous to do so. For those joining the Legion, it's not about ancient traditions and political upset, but more about defending their home against these radicalized Nords. Most joining the Legion aren't happy about the Talos ban, but they recognize that a unified empire is the only way to stand a chance against the real threat to Talos worship, the Aldmeri Dominion. At the demand of Legate Ritka, the Empire launches an expedition into the ancient Nordic tomb of Korbenjund in search of an item of great importance to Ulfric, the Jagged Crown. Unfortunately for the Legion, the Stormcloaks were dispatched to the same location at the behest of Ulfric's top general, Galmar Stonefist. But what makes the Jagged Crown so important that each side would risk so many men and supplies to retrieve it? It all comes down to legend. In Nordic tradition, the Jarls of the various holds gather together for an electoral meeting, known as a moot, in order to determine who will become the new High King of Skyrim. After the death of High King Torrig, a moot is inevitable. Galmar recognizes that if Ulfric were to obtain the Jagged Crown, a symbol of the old times of powerful kings and reverent subjects, it would help to legitimize his claim to the throne of Skyrim, thus swaying the moot to elect him the new High King. Legate Ritka, a staunch Nord herself, recognizes the same and seeks to not only deny Ulfric the symbol, but also to prop it upon the head of Elisif, Torg's widow, who the Empire is sponsoring for Skyrim's next High King. While both Tullius and Ulfric disagree with this course of action, both place trust in the counsel of their top field commanders and proceed with the operation. The accounts as to which army arrived first are conflicting, and after a long and bloodied battle, the Jagged Crown disappears from history. It is unknown which side managed to seize it, if it existed at all. Following the retrieval attempt of the Jagged Crown, both sides send a message to Whiterun, the Empire requesting to garrison troops in the city for its protection, and Ulfric demanding they submit and join the Stormcloaks. Jarl Balgruuf of Whiterun maintained an uneasy neutrality for the beginning of this war, but ultimately aligns with the Empire, leading directly to the Stormcloak siege of the city. While the victor is never determined, the importance of this battle cannot be understated, as not only does this tip the scales of territory and fighting power in favor of the Empire, but this pivotal battle marks a turning point in the war itself. The tactics on both sides mirror each other for the remainder of the conflict, with legionaries and stormcloaks alike killing couriers in order to forge and present false orders to the other side, rescuing prisoners of war, disrupting supply caravans, and launching attacks on various enemy-occupied forts, all culminating in the siege of the opposing forces' capital and the death of their commander. While the Civil War outcome is entirely dependent on who the Dragonborn decides to back, and whether they seek to unite the two against Alduin or not, it becomes clear that in the long run, the Imperial Legion will win. Even with the Dragonborn's interference, and even in the event of Tullius's death and subsequent loss of all territory in Skyrim, which is highly unlikely due to the Legion edging out the Stormcloak army in nearly all comparative factors, a more experienced and diverse Legion is waiting on the other side of the Pale Pass, ready to cross into Skyrim as soon as the winter snow thaws, and take back any and all positions they would have lost in the war. There is a huge factor that is often overlooked when discussing the outcome of the Civil War, and that's the Empire's response to the conflict. Should Ulfric win, the Empire will no longer see this as a petty squabble that a single military governor can handle with a conscript army. No, they will see Ulfric as a tried and true threat, opting to send even more legions to Skyrim. With the size of Ulfric's army tied to Skyrim's population, and no certainty of foreign aid, he will never be able to match the numbers that the Empire can throw at him. His one saving grace is that the Empire has most of their legions on the southern border to defend against an imminent attack from the Aldmeri Dominion, and pulling from there would leave them too weak to properly defend Cyrodiil, should the worst happen. But from what we analyzed earlier, a single, full-strength Imperial Legion should be more than enough to take the whole of Skyrim back from the Stormcloaks. That's not even including their second smoking gun, the Imperial Navy. By 201 of the Fourth Era, the Imperial Navy has had nearly 30 years to rebuild after the devastation they faced in the Great War with the Aldmeri Dominion. While little is known as to the status of the Navy by the events of the Civil War, we can infer based on the Emperor's arrival in Skyrim by sea that not only are there open routes, but that it's possible to launch a secondary invasion force into the province from the north. With the Stormcloaks lacking any navy that we can ascertain, they would be highly vulnerable to an invasion of this magnitude, with only the natural treachery of the Sea of Ghosts to protect their northern flank. With the Legion in Skyrim already giving Ulfric a run for his money, and reinforcements just on the horizon, it becomes clear that in the Civil War, the Stormcloaks are not only outclassed, but ultimately outnumbered. Suffice it to say, the war will be long and bloody for both, but the Imperial Legion will always win.